about the niggas trying to hit a leak and trying to kill son.
What's good? What's good? What's good, everybody? What's good? It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you want to call me. And we are back for another one. Alright, y'all, new topic. Life after Undisputed. Alright, y'all, so what is the welterweight division? What is life gonna be like after Undisputed for Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr.? Is life after Undisputed gonna be good, bad, or retired? One of these guys, I feel like it's going away after this Undisputed fight. Because listen, I think there's going to be so much animosity, I think, built up between these two. There's so much frustration, there's so much passion built up for this fight and for this whole Undisputed situation that obviously somebody is getting hurt in this fight. To me, I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks in this fight. I don't think either fighter is going to hold back. And I do believe somebody is going to come out of this fight no longer the same fighter. Now, of course, somebody's old has to go. And that could potentially be the reason they're not the same fighter. Someone can get injured. Me personally, I think Terence Crawford is going to be the victim of this whole situation. I think his O is the one that is... His O, I think, means more to him than Errol Spence's O means to him. I don't think Errol Spence cares about the O. And I feel that way because you got to look at which fighter is actually challenging themselves. And I think when you look at who's actually challenging themselves, you will see who really cares less about the O, because the person who cares more about the O is going to put themselves in better position to win. They're not going to take the best competition. They're not going to take the tougher fights. They're not going to be fighting all the champions. And the guy who cares a lot about the O is the guy who's putting himself in safer situations. The guy who is doing more cherry matchmaking than the other one, and is the guy who ultimately is not signing off on the contract. You know, I don't think money matters to Errol Spence. I don't think the O matters to Errol Spence. I don't think anything but boxing legacy and greatness matter to Errol Spence. And I think he's proven that not only by fighting the best fighters he could possibly match up with, but fighting champions as well. Now, I know 1,000,001 arguments could be made. Well, PBC had the titles, so it was hard for Terence Crawford to make these fights. PBC this, PBC that. Terence Crawford couldn't because of Bob Arum. You know, all the excuses in the world that could be made for why Crawford refused to challenge himself. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. One guy challenged himself, the other guy didn't. And you have to look at it for what it is. If one guy was willing to go out there and fight the best and put it all on the line, and the other guy used his promoter as a built-in excuse for why he didn't put it all on the line, and now you're seeing with this negotiating process how difficult Terence Crawford really is to deal with. I almost kind of feel sorry for Bob Arum at this point. Like, wow, you had to deal with this in the negotiating room. This is actually what you were dealing with this whole time. Like, Crawford is really that much of a prima donna, crybaby, and you seriously had to put up with this crap, you know, from a professional fighter You know, I respect fighters who put it all on the line. I respect fighters who go balls to the wall. I respect anybody who says, you know, my talent speaks for itself. I don't care who I'm in the ring with. You know, of course these guys deserve to get paid for their talent, but legacy should always trump paycheck. Legacy should always trump paycheck. You know, this is why I have so much more respect for the past generations of fighters, because those fighters weren't basing their whole career off of a paycheck. When Ali got in the ring, he wasn't doing it for a paycheck. He was doing it for his legacy. He was doing it because he wanted to prove that he was the baddest MFer in this game. And I feel similar about Errol Spence Jr. because of his road to how he got here. You know, his road to getting here was a difficult road. It wasn't paved with a bunch of gimmies. It was paved with adversity, championship fights, and hard work. And, you know, the only blemish that I will give Errol Spence on his resume is the fact he didn't fight Pacquiao. And, you know, I'm not holding it against him so much because he did get his out of the mud. He did fight 3 champions. He did fight the best fighters he could possibly fight. Now, you can feel however you want to about his eye injury. I don't give him an excuse for the eye injury. But I will say that it's not such a big blemish to me that he didn't fight Pacquiao, even though I wish he would have. But I'm not going to hold it against him that much because of the Pacquiao situation. Crawford's a little different. Crawford was on the same promotional company as Manny Pacquiao. Crawford had golden opportunities to fight Manny Pacquiao. Crawford hasn't fought the best competition. Crawford didn't fight 3 champions. You know, so I would actually hold it more against Terence Crawford than I would against Errol Spence that he didn't fight Pacquiao, because Crawford's resume isn't as solid as Errol Spence's resume is. So what's life going to look like after this undisputed fight? Who's going to be taken more seriously? Who's going to be... Because I think, you know, ultimately, whoever wins this fight, I do believe is going to move on from welterweight, because I don't think they want any parts of Boots or Virgil, but more Boots. So I don't think life after Undisputed is going to even involve both of these guys as welterweights anymore. I think the only reason that Errol Spence would stick around 147 after he beat Terence Crawford would be to give Terence Crawford a rematch. It wouldn't be to fight Boots. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think the person who has more of a chance of fighting Boots would be the loser. And I would still say, even if Errol Spence lost, it's highly unlikely, because he's more likely to move to 154 and fight a Charlo and try to get that big payday, or try to get a Triple G fight, depending on who wins the Triple G Canelo. I really don't see Errol Spence sticking around this weight any longer than he has to. And what I mean by any longer than he has to, if there's no rematch clause, consider Errol Spence gone. If Terence Crawford doesn't win, consider Errol Spence gone. If Errol Spence definitively beats Terence Crawford in the first fight, consider Errol Spence gone. He's not sticking around 147 for Boots, for Virgil, or for Crawford anymore. I think it's already over as far as 147 goes for Errol Spence. Terence Crawford's a little different. He could stick around 147 because he's not having difficulty making the weight. He can stick around 147 as long as he wants to. Will he actually stick around 147 if he loses? I actually think he will. I think he will even if he loses. But I'm going to tell you why. Because I think if Errol Spence beats Terence Crawford definitively, then I think Errol Spence is going to drop those titles anyway and move to 154. Now, does he do that immediately, or does he hold those belts go test the water at 154 and then eventually drop him after he wins one or maybe two fights at 154. We'll have to see how that plays out and how he decides to go about that. But I don't think he sticks around at all. I think if he beats Crawford, beats him conventionally, he more than likely will drop the titles and move to 154. Fight whoever's the number one contender for Charlo's belts, and if he beats them, then move on to probably a Charlo fight, which I don't think is smart, but I see it happening. Unless Charlo moves on to a higher weight here in the near future, then I think you might see Spence versus a Charlo if he beats Crawford. And then Terence Crawford would probably stick around 147 because he can pick up all the pieces of 147. He might end up having to fight Boots to become the champion, you know, the unified champion or whatever, undisputed or whatever. But I think that's a good fight. And even if he lost, then that's a good fight. And it's another big payday, because I think if he loses and then fights Boots, I think that becomes a big fight, especially if Boots fights Thurman and beats Thurman. You know, I think Crawford Boots becomes a huge fight at that point. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. Y'all hit that like button for me, share, subscribe. Tell me what you think down in the comment section. Holler at me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, but you're more than likely to get a response on the tube. So holler at me over there if you want a response. It's your boy, Cardinal Bud Crawford, or E.S. Red, if that's what you want to call me. And we are
Bobby Spur, the nigga gon' pull a murder. Them niggas who ain't with the distance.